Hello, everyone. My name is Lori Quiller, and welcome to the Air Force Culture and Language Center's Facebook Live event. We're here today with AFCLC's Deputy Language Division Chief and Chinese Leap Scholar, Major Robert Early, and we would like to invite you to join us in the Air Force's Global Classroom. Before we begin, we ask that you observe a few simple rules. Maintain principles and standards of professional behavior and communication. Please mute your mics while others are speaking. Hold your questions until the end of the brief, where you may unmute your mics and ask your questions or enter them into the chat. Follow proper OPSEC procedures and guidance, and remain cognizant that Facebook is an unclassified medium. With these in mind, let's get started. Major Early, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me today.
So how did you become a LEAP Scholar?
Well, so I joined as a cadet back in 2011. So at that time, LEAP was becoming the Air Force's program of record. And I happened to be a foreign language major who, as part of my degree, I'd gotten an oral proficiency interview. So I scored an intermediate high on that. That's about equivalent to a 1+ in DLPT terms. And my detachment commander fully supported my joining the program. And as luck would have it, I got in.
Well, we were certainly glad that you did. What exactly attracted you to the LEAP program?
So at that time, I had recently discovered a real love for languages, and I'd also just recently made a commitment to join the Air Force. So I think at the time, joining LEAP was just a very natural response to like everything that had been building up at that time in my life. As a cadet, I didn't have a clear picture of what I'd be doing in the Air Force, but I did have a clear picture of how important language and culture were. So I'd been a contractor working in Spangdahlem, Germany. And, I'd seen the difference between service members who understood that they were operating in the German environment versus those that expected the environment to kind of twist and bend to them. And later, as part of my degree, when I studied abroad in Beijing, that really only got amplified. And I saw the American and the European students that were also learning language there that didn't take the time to understand how to operate in China. And they just basically repeat the same classes and just remain perpetual tourists while they were there.
Can you talk a little bit about some of the training that you've done that furthered your LEAP culture and language skills?
Absolutely. So language is a lot like physical fitness. It has to be a part of your life or you'll lose it. And so just like with physical fitness, where you might have a personal training routine that keeps you fit, it's not necessarily going to hit every muscle group. So in a language, you can remain fluent in a language while failing to expand your vocabulary in certain areas or forgetting how to say certain things. And so that's one of the great things about LEAP, because I think it's really easy for people that love studying language to focus on things they're interested in. And they know they have weak areas, but actually pushing themselves to that is a lot harder. So they've got the online e-mentor courses and the language intensive training events, TDYs, that are not only an opportunity for sustainment, but they're a vehicle to improve the areas where you're weak. So you can argue that you don't need a program for that, motivated airmen will find ways to learn the language. But even if you're motivated to learn, just having access to professional instructors that give you feedback is huge on telling you where you're strong and where you're weak.
One of the hallmarks of the LEAP Scholar program is being able to support other different events across the globe. Can you talk about some of the events that you've supported as a LEAP Scholar?
Sure. So in 2014, I was a lieutenant at Joint Base McGuire-Dix Lakehurst. And at that time, the International Military Sports Council, which is known as CISM, was holding the wrestling meet there. And so people could volunteer to be handlers for the various national teams that were going to be on base. So I helped out with the Chinese cohort. There were 3 general officers and a colonel in the leadership cadre there. And then they'd have the athletes, right, that they were kind of focusing on. So understanding who that team was and understanding the cohort and being able to connect with some of them on a personal level made a lot of the problems a lot easier to solve. So on the first day, as I was talking to them, I found out that the colonel was from a small city in southern China that I'd visited before. And so, I was able to make that personal connection. with them, and they would, that made them feel comfortable to come to me with issues, or if I was communicating issues that base leadership had with the teams, right, they were very receptive to what I was saying. And if you had a culture course on official business in China, you might have heard the famous conventional wisdom that they're famously indirect. And that's because you have to develop that personal connection, right? Otherwise, this colonel could get things done with the cadre, with the students, and I was able to make that connection.
Now, last summer, you were part of AFCLC's first Cyber Light. Can you talk about that experience?
Yes. So the Cyber Light was an incredible opportunity to just do something that you're never going to accidentally run into. So we had topics like military cyber, the what cyber looks like in other regions and other languages. So if you try and look that up on your own, a lot of the information sources there are just American doctrine translated into the language. It's not necessarily what those regions and countries actually use and would actually say. So being able to have a place like, can you imagine someone who has the perspective of English, German, Chinese, and Russian cyber operations? So if that person exists, I've never met them, right? But that's the perspective we got from this course by having these language instructors, by having these cyber college instructors all together, and then focusing both on the Department of Defense's stated goals and how that plays into different regions culturally. So I can't think of any cyber initiative spanning across borders that would not be improved by having an airman who took that course present. And I'd trust any member that attended that course to give General Brown a status update on regional cyber concerns. So it was great.
And we're going to do it again this year.
That's true. Yeah, we're running it again. We've added some languages, and going to have a larger focus on global regional influence, and try and just make kind of the end result a little more focused for even those outside of the language community to get more out of it.
Thank you, sir. We have a few audience questions, so let's get to those.
All right.
Let's see. There was one that came in from Facebook about DLPT scores. Can you talk about how your DLPT scores affect you becoming a LEAP scholar? Do you take the DLPT more than once, or do you take it just one time? Is that a test that you have to take just once?
So to be an active participant in LEAP, you have to have current DLPT scores. They can be expired for a little bit and you won't get immediately kicked out of the program, but it's one of the requirements to upkeep. And so if you're scoring less than a 3 in 2 modalities, then you have to take that test every year. And if you score a 3 in 2 or more modalities, 3 or above, then you have to take it every 2 years. If you're in some kind of special deployment or another situation when you're unable to take that test and you're already in the program, you can go ahead and get put on a review hold as long as you let us know. But yes, have to periodically take that test. Well, looks like we might have lost Miss Quiller. Does anyone else have the Facebook questions ready? Here. Sorry, everyone. I'll go ahead and pop on.
Major Early, this is Scott. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
I think the AUSYS Wi-Fi just dropped, which means we probably dropped the Facebook live stream as well. So give us just 1 minute to try to reconnect.
Okay, copy. I'll stand by. Oh, no, looks like at least I can see myself. All right, so I'll just read some of these questions as they come up. So, what do you do to prepare for a light? Well, that's a good question. So, if you're actually did on, well, hopefully everyone was able to hear my answer for the DLPT question. So, on prepping for a language intensive training event, as far as the actual preparation for it, right? It's a usually OCONUS TDY to a region that speaks the language you're studying. With COVID, we've sometimes had to resort to CONUS areas for that. But as you go there, right, the team at AFCLC, you'll get the LDCs reaching out to you, giving you kind of a checklist of things to go through. So you actually go, you get a statement of understanding from your commander because obviously you're going TDY and you won't be at work. And then once you get that statement of understanding, there's a checklist making sure that you have everything in order, right? Some of the countries that we have to go to require visas. Some of them might require official passports. And so running through that. And once you get all those requirements, then in addition to that, you'll be put into contact with what kind of language program you're going to. And depending on where you're going and the school you're going, there might be suggested reporting procedures. But overall, it's in terms of what you have to do to prepare. It's an OCONUS TDY. It's not a huge deal in terms of the prep you have to do, and it's an amazing opportunity to really immerse yourself in the language. And I know for myself, it's been the case, and for other people, it's been the case that they really get a big boost to their language there. Thank you for that question. All right. And any other questions? Let's see, I'll just refresh this, make sure there's nothing appearing that I can't see. Oh, there we go. Immersion language training, and are you a foreign area officer, career specialty? All right. Thank you very much for that question. So I am not a foreign area officer. I am a 14 November intel officer, and I haven't had immersion training per se. I've been on a light where I went to Shanghai, and I've also, as part of my undergrad, lived in Beijing for a while. So I've obviously had the opportunity to use it a lot there. For both of those items, the most important thing when you're learning language is really just not to use English as a crutch as much as you can, even if it's really hard for you to communicate and you have to use body language or come up with silly ways of explaining things. That'll do a lot better in forcing your brain to remember those things. and to learn. So I definitely, you can turn a light into immersion training as long as you just, eschew English while you're on it. And then, how difficult is it for you to travel to the country of your target language, professionally and leisurely? Well, right now with China, it's just about impossible. Professionally, right, there's certain restrictions towards U.S. service members traveling to China, and then specifically the People's Republic of China. And then because of COVID, both the People's Republic of China and other areas in China are locked off for most forms of travel, including tourism travel in most cases. So it's very hard to get in there. And if you do, you have to quarantine for long periods of time, which can make it hard, right? You add an extra 2 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks onto your travel plans, and that's a lot. In terms of professional training, we have looked at other locations. So we've sent people to Singapore, and we've had some success on that. As far as keeping up with language skills, I would say, as much as possible, if you have any kind of media or if you've got other speakers wherever you live that you can practice with, right? Go into a specialty grocery store, anything you can do just to use it is useful. But obviously that doesn't hit all bases, and that's just another reason why being in LEAP, it really helps when you have things like the eMentor online courses to make up that difference. All right, and hopefully that was a good answer to the questions. All right, you're welcome. All right, anything else? I'll wait just a couple more minutes. Okay, so I got a question. Do you think learning a new language can change your cultural perspective to a point it changes your beliefs? I mean, yes. So that's obviously a little bit of a vague question, and it really depends what your beliefs were, right? And what you learn and how that can affect it. So to give some examples of that, right? I know you take a lot of things for granted, I think, wherever you are, that what you're experiencing is normal because everyone around you agrees that it's normal. And you go somewhere else that's different, and that changes. So the language itself, it gives you two things. Number one, it gives you a different way of processing information. There are certain things that I know for myself I can think of in Chinese that I can't perfectly think of in English, and vice versa, just because the languages aren't built to be able to say that. But beyond that, once you actually go into a country, rule of law, right? Rule of law is, I think, something that we take for granted in the United States. But you really trace it back to, English common law and the Magna Carta, when the barons said that there's certain things the king can't force them to do. That's a lot of things that never happened in East Asia. And as a result, if you look at like the legal basis of things, they're very different when you trace them back in East Asia. And the legal system is very different in China. My understanding of Japan and Korea, it's also not the same. And you really start to understand, like, oh, this is a lot of things that we've constructed that aren't necessarily like objective truth that everyone's going to understand. And that's helpful when you talk to people and try and get on the same page that they're on. All right. Do LEAP participants receive an additional skill identifier? So good question. So right now, and the follow-up on that is, does the Air Force have centralized personnel system, have positions specifically coded for LEAP graduates? So on the latter, not at this time, but we do have a special experience identifier that will show up in our personnel system and on our career briefs if certain requirements are met. So at this time, you can potentially get your DLPT scores posted on your career brief, but there is a special experience identifier related to LEAP specifically that says that you have a 2 in at least 2 modalities, right? You're looking usually at a 2, 1 plus in terms of reading, listening, speaking. And once you get at least a 2 in 2 modalities and complete some form of either language training event, then you can get a SEI for the program, and that can be tracked and searched for. So that is one thing we do offer, is getting that SEI in the program, and it's searchable, and it just kind of speaks to a certain minimum level of quality you can expect from that person because they've been active in the program, they've been consistently getting their scores, and they're at that professional capable level. And I'll wait a couple more minutes so to fill the time while I do that. Just I do highly recommend, right? When you learn a language, you have to keep using it however you can. And that's really, I think, part of the bedrock of the LEAP program is just giving those sustainment opportunities to continue studying and continue remembering the language. And it can be useful in places you wouldn't necessarily think of. So I had the amazing opportunity to be deployed. I have to use finger quotes for it. Deployed to Rota, Spain, right? Extended TDY. And while I was there, I don't speak much Spanish outside of basic, right, survival. Hey, I grew up in the United States, Spanish. And so when I had complicated questions, I wanted to ask people to find out information about the city I was in or to get around. What I found was most useful is to find a Chinese convenience store, because the Chinese diaspora in Spain, they're mostly from Zhejiang, and they like opening little convenience stores. So you'll just look for, Bazar de Oriental or Bazar de Chino. And I could speak Mandarin to them and ask whatever kind of questions I had, and really helped me get around Spain. So just unexpected things that you can get out of your language. All right, well, if another question pops up, I'll try and answer it. But outside of that, really learning languages is it's something that you should have passion about. I really, really do like comparing it to physical fitness, because just like with physical fitness, if all you do is show up to your squadron PT and follow along, and then you go home and you drink Mountain Dew and play video games all day, right? You're not going to be physically fit. And in the same way, learning languages and learning culture is something that you invest personal time in. But the results of that are just incredible. And there's just huge parts of the world that we never hear about going about our days from a standard mainstream English talking point from an American perspective. And you miss out on all that if you don't have any other cultural or language lens to go through. The language helps you understand what's being said, and the culture helps you understand the context, and also to kind of like search out meaning and search out areas where you can use that language. And between those two things, you can really accomplish a lot. So, oh, there we go. How can we become more competitive to be selected for lights or training partnerships? So lights, right, is a question we get a lot, like, hey, can I go on a light? There's various factors that go into being selected for a light. But honestly, your best bet is to just update your availability, have availability open so that, you know, when there are those opportunities to send people on language intensive training events and we do searches, that your name pops up, as well as just show continued growth, right? And showcase that you're at a level where eMentor is helping, but that immersive training will help you a lot more. And as far as training partnerships go, because, and for those who don't know what training partnerships are, is when an outside organization reaches out to AFCLC and says they want help with something, and they're either, it's either document translation or virtual help, or that they're willing to pay TDY costs for someone to come help them for a specific situation. And in those cases, it's going to be all about your skill set, right? If we need a document translated from German to English, what are we primarily going to look at? We're going to look at your German reading and writing capability. And while writing is not a DLPT modality, it is something that we score in the leader system through your eMentor classes. And so we'll look for people that are active and have a sufficient level of skill in those areas. Depending on what the request is, we might look at your job, right? If you have an engineering background and they're engineering documents, it makes a lot more sense for you to translate that versus someone that has no engineering background. But because of the fact that it is for that functional, practical purpose, it's somewhat luck-based whether you get that opportunity, because it requires a specific skill set.
Thank you so much, Major Early, for being able to jump on this live with us. We apologize for some of those technical difficulties we've had, but we want to thank you for joining in today. We thank you all who joined us on both Facebook and Zoom to participate in this AFCLC TV today. If you have any other additional questions for Major Early, we'll be happy to connect you afterwards. So until next time, remember, we are AFCLC, the Air Force's Global Classroom.